What's good, YouTube? My name is Coach, and in today's video, we're going to be reviewing the Enduring Enchantments Commander deck. I always say the same thing when these videos start. These videos are meant for players that are brand new to Magic the Gathering. So if you're someone that has years of experience playing Magic, I would recommend just clicking the link for the deck list in the description below and just reviewing this yourself. For everyone else, I'm going to explain and review each card inside this deck so that when you sit down and play, you know exactly what you're doing when you play this deck. Now, the Enduring Enchantments Commander deck is an Enchantress Commander deck. And generally, Enchantress Commander decks are decks that tend to flow extremely well because everything that you play triggers something else. Because there are so many different synergies between all of the cards inside this deck, I would tell new players right off the bat that this deck is a lot of mental load while you're playing. So if you want to play a deck that is a bit more beginner friendly, I would recommend clicking the link of all the other reviews that we have on the channel so that you can find a deck that works best for you. However, we haven't seen the cards yet, so we're gonna take a look to see how it actually ends up working out. The commander for this deck is Anikthea, the Hand of Erebos. She has Menace. It says other enchantment creatures you control have Menace. Whenever Anikthea enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to one target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black zombie creature in addition to its other types. So whenever she enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to create a 3/3 creature based on an enchantment in your graveyard, which seems pretty cool because essentially what you're going to end up doing is turning your graveyard into your hand with Anikthea as your commander. When she has Menace meaning new players that whenever Anikthea attacks, people need 2 creatures in order to be able to successfully block Anikthea. We have another card here named Narcy, and we'll come back to Narcy later. We'll take a look at all the other cards first. The first card we have here is the Archon of Sun's Grace. Archon of Sun's Grace is a 4-mana creature. Flying lifelink. It says whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 white Pegasus creature token with flying. So this is the beginning of exactly what I just got done saying. What's going to end up happening is a lot of the cards are going to synergize with one another. So whenever you do something, this happens. But imagine 4 or 5 cards saying that same exact thing. So whenever enchantment enters, you're going to gain 1 life, you're going to draw a card, you're going to create a Pegasus, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you can go get a sandwich. There's so many different things that are going to happen when you put an enchantment in play. So keep in mind that it's going to take a mental load on you while you're playing, so just be aware. Then we have Heliod, God of the Sun. Heliod, God of the Sun is indestructible, okay? You need at least 5 white pips of mana amongst the permanents you control in order for him to become a creature, which means he can attack and block. He says that other creatures you control have Vigilance, and then you can pay 4 mana to put a 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. I like this card. It has indestructible, gives your creatures vigilance, and vigilance means that you can attack and you still have the ability to block because your creature doesn't tap, and that's good. Mesa Enchantress, fantastic card right here. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. The sweet spot I'll be looking for in this Precon is if there's 4 or 5 Enchantresses, I'll be really happy with this commander deck, and literally anybody can play this deck right out of the box and it'd be fantastic as long as it has cards like this where it says you play an enchantment, you draw a card. Starfield Mystic, enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a counter on Starfield of Nyx. This is basically just making your enchantments cost less. You keep this card inside the deck, it's really good. We have a Doomwake Giant. Whenever Doomwake Giant or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 till the end of turn, which is a nice way if your opponents are playing something like goblins, that you can just kind of wipe out your opponent's goblins every single time you play an enchantment, because goblins tend to be 1/1s. Next we have Erebos, Bleak-Hearted, indestructible. Once again, if your devotion to black is less than 5, Erebos isn't a creature. Whenever another creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life. If you do, you draw a card. You can pay 1 colorless and a black to sack a creature, and then target creature gets -2/-1 till the end of turn. So another way to draw cards. Good, keep this card in the deck. Arastra of the Endless Web. It's an enchantment creature, so whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, you create a 1/2 creature token. It is an enchantment creature, so it's gonna trigger all the other enchantment stuff. I just think that there may be other cards that would be better. Courser of Crufix. You can play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play lands on the top of your library. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Cool. Enchantment creature. More lands are good. You do have to reveal the top card of your library, which is a thing. The Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Okay. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, so you can play 2 lands every turn. And then lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So this just fixes your mana and turns your plains into every type of land. Eidolon of Blossoms. Whenever Eidolon of Blossoms or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. And keep in mind, like I didn't mention this before, when we're playing enchantments like this, guys, that says where it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. These are the staples for the deck. You need these cards in order to play these decks well. So just keep in mind, you only really need 1 and at max 2 on the battlefield at one time. Don't just throw all the enter the battlefield and draw cards onto the battlefield as quickly as possible, because if somebody destroys all of them, then you're out of card draw. We have Herald of the Pantheon. Enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life. Good. Sanctum Weaver, yeah. Whenever you tap this, you're gonna add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. Perfect. Setessan Champion, there's another. This is number 3. Whenever enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a counter on the champion, and then you draw a card. So another way to play an enchantment, draw a card. We're up to 3 so far. Verdure and Enchantress. Whenever you play an enchantment spell, you may draw a card. We're up to 4. So we've already hit that sweet spot, guys. This deck is already like a 9. This deck is very strong, guys. Just based off of this, automatically it's gonna play really well, because you're gonna draw into a lot of your best cards if you keep drawing a lot of cards. It's already really good, guys. Like if you want a good base to build another enchantment deck, all the enchantresses inside here you can use inside this deck to build any enchantress deck you want. Yeah, I'm looking forward to owning this deck. Spirited Companion enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Yeah, you can probably take this out, but it's an enchantment. Mind Rack Harpy. At the beginning of combat, each player puts the top 3 cards of their library into your graveyard. Yeah, that's bad for your opponents, good for you, because your graveyard's kind of like your hand. Destiny Spinner. Creature and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. That's relevant when your opponents are playing blue. And then for 4 mana, target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until the end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control. This could, you know, you're not playing that card for that. You're playing that because it's an enchantment creature and because it can make things uncounterable. However, that ability can win a game depending on the situation. We have a Greater Tanuki. You can channel this and or discard this card to search your library for a basic land. It has trample. Guys, take this card out of the deck. This is a bad card. We have the Nessian Wanderer. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a land from among them and put that card into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in random order. It's decent. It's a good way to continuously make sure you have lands in your hand. Jukai Naturalist. Enchantment spells you control cost 1 less to cast. Fantastic. Great. The Nyx Weaver. At the beginning of your upkeep, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. While they're really feeding into this mill, you can then pay 3 to exile the Nyx Weaver and then return a card from your graveyard to your hand. It's cool. Satyr Enchanter. Up to 5 right now, guys. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you draw a card. Great. Good. Okay. Felidar Retreat. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you can choose 1. Create a 2/2 white cat, put a 1/1 counter in each creature you control. I mean, technically it is an enchantment. There are cards that allow you to play multiple lands per turn and then help you look for lands. So I see the synergy, but generally when this card is just good inside this deck, inside any deck really, Felidar Retreat is good. Yeah, you should be happy to have this card. Grasp of Fate. When it enters the battlefield for each opponent, you're going to exile up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls until it leaves the battlefield. For each opponent. So, yeah, it's cool. Just remove 1 thing from everybody. Sigil of the Empty Throne. Oh my god. This is going to win you game, guys. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. Keep in mind, guys, that Sigil of the Empty Throne, you could exile with Anikthea if it ends up being in your graveyard to turn that into a creature. And then you could turn Sigil of the Empty Throne. You could play a card that makes multiple copies of that Sigil of the Empty Throne, and then what if you have 3 copies or 3 creatures that are Sigils of the Empty Throne, and then you make 3 4/4 angels every time you cast an enchantment spell? Guys, that's pretty wild. Oh, the Starfield of Nyx. At the beginning of your upkeep, you return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Yeah, you want to do that. Imagine having 3 copies of Starfield of Nyx. As long as you control 5 or more enchantments, which is definitely going to happen, each other non-aura enchantment you control is a creature in addition to its other types and has base power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. Cool. I mean, if your enchantments cost a lot of mana, that's pretty cool. I will say, though, that this turns your enchantments into your creatures, so people can just target your enchantments to removal or board wipes. So just only use this when you know that you have enough things to just wipe people out of the game. Otherwise, you run the risk of losing your entire board. Cunning Rhetoric. Whenever an opponent attacks you and or one or more planeswalkers you control, exile the top card of that player's library. You may play that card this turn for as long as it remains exiled and spend mana as if it were mana of any color to cast it. Yeah, I don't know why this card, it's in the deck and you have it there. I would take this card out and put in something else. Dreadhorde Invasion. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life and amass 1. Whenever a zombie you control attacks with power 6 or greater, it gains lifelink until the end of turn. That lifelink ability is relevant because Anikthea is creating 3/3 black zombies, and if for whatever reason they turn into 6-powered zombies, they now have lifelink. We have a Tyrannid copy of Abundance here. If you would draw a card, you may instead choose land or non-land and reveal cards on the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind. Put that card into your hand and put all other cards revealed this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. Yeah, cool. I mean, if you have Feldar Retreat and you need lands, you can just call land and go ahead and do that. Or if you want enchantments, you can do that too. Oh my god, we're up to 6, guys. We're up to 6. Enchantress's Presence. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you draw a card. Yeah, that's what you want to do. The Mending of Dominaria. You mill 2 cards, and then you return a creature card from graveyard to your hand for 2 turns in a row. And then on the 3rd turn, you're going to return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then shuffle your graveyard into your library. Which seems cool. I mean, I would probably take this card out of the deck, but inside of Precon is cool. It's a big play at the right time. Sandworm Convergence. Creatures with flying can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. Okay. At the beginning of your end step, create a 5/5 green worm creature token. Cool. Keeping in mind that we could exile this card and turn this into a 3/3 creature that says creatures with flying can't attack you, and then at the beginning of your end step, you create a 5/5. I mean, when you think about it from that perspective, this card is actually a bomb. It's super good. The Battle for Bredegard. Create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. Create a 1/1 green elf warrior, and then choose any number of artifact tokens and or creature tokens you control at different names. For each of them, create a token that's a copy of it. Yeah, that's what I was saying. So imagine making multiple copies of the tokens that you create with Anikthea. Cool. You have to wait many turns for that to happen, but hey, it's a cool play in a Precon. Mirari's Wake, okay. Cool. So creatures you control get +1/+1, and then whenever you tap a land for mana, you're gonna add 1 extra mana of that color to your mana pool. Yeah, I'm just imagining making multiple copies of this. We now have Cast Out. Cast Out says when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield. When I build this deck, these are the type of cards I'm gonna include inside this deck. This one's specifically good because it has flash, and you could cycle this to draw a card. However, just playing these enchantments are not auras, right? And you could then play them to just exile things from your opponent's board and make the deck feel a little bit more control-y because you're constantly exiling your opponent's cards. Love Song of Night and Day. Okay, you and target opponent each draws 2 cards. Okay, create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying, and then number 3, put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Yeah, take this card out of the deck, guys. Omen of the Sun, flash. When it enters the battlefield, you're going to create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, gain 2 life. Take this card out of the deck. Eldest Reborn. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Cool. Each opponent then discards a card. Cool. And then you can put a creature or planeswalker from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Cool. Binding of the Titans. Each player puts the top 3 cards of the library into the graveyard. Okay. Exile up to 2 cards from target graveyard. Exile up to 2 cards from graveyards. For each creature card exiled this way, you gain 1 life. Cool. Return target creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. 2 mana. Okay. Font of Fertility. Okay, 1 mana. You can pay 2 mana to sacrifice this. Search library for a basic land. And then put onto the battlefield tapped. Cool. Colony Heart Expedition. It's nice art. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a quest counter on this, and then you can remove 3 counters from Colony Heart Expedition and sacrifice it. And then you're gonna search the library for 2 basic lands and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Guys, there's this Enchantress, and then you have this landfall theme inside here. You know, you could kind of buy the deck and then build a landfall deck and then build a complete Enchantress deck if you want. Technically, you're spending money. You're getting 2 decks for 1 deck. Omen of the Hunt. When it enters the battlefield, you're gonna put a land onto the battlefield. You can scry. Yeah, you keep this. It's good. Binding of the Old Gods. Okay, you can destroy target non-land permanent opponent controls. Cool. Then you can ramp to get a forest, and then you can creatures. And then your creature's gonna gain Death Touch, which is not really that relevant. You really just play this to destroy a permanent. We have Calyx Destiny's Hand. It says, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an enchantment card from among them, and then put that card into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library. Okay, that's when you +1. You can -3 to exile target creature or an enchantment you don't control until target enchantment you control leaves the battlefield. So you're just like, well, because this is here, that's exiled, and when this goes away, you can get that back. And then -7, you can return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Cool, and in this deck, that legitimately may win people games. We now have a Culling Ritual, which is, God, this card right here on turn 4 feels really good if your opponents are playing Soul Rings or playing a bunch of cards to ramp early. This really just stops your opponents from gaining a ton of advantage. It's a good card. We have Extinguish All Hope, which is the emotion that you feel when people cast a Culling Ritual. We have Kadama's Reach, which is going to get you some lands. Farseek's going to get you some lands, and Rampant Growth's going to get you some lands. And just keep in mind that Extinguish All Hope says destroy all non-enchantment creatures, so it's technically like a one-sided board wipe inside this deck because we have a ton of enchantment creatures. So for 6 mana, that's a really good card. We do have 1 instant here, which is a Path to Exile, which is nice. And then we have the Arcane Signet, which is cool, and then a Soul Ring, which is in every commander deck that's ever existed. We're going to go over the lands really quickly. We have a Canopy Vista, good, that taps for a 2 mana, can enter untapped. That's good, enters untapped. This has the ability to enter untapped, which is good. This can enter untapped, which is good. Gray enters, you know, untapped, which is nice. This one enters tapped, but you get to scry 1. These 3 lands basically do that same exact thing, which is nice. This is gonna help you fix the mana that you have. Ash Barrens is cool. Command Tower, alright, Golgari Farm does enter tapped. Croson Verge enters tapped. This enters tapped. Enters tapped. Enters tapped, okay. Does not enter tapped, which is good, and that does not enter tapped either. And these are all just basic lands. Yeah, I mean, if you're a new player and you want to make the deck a bit more competitive, you remove all the lands that enter tapped and swap them out for something else. Because these cards on the website don't show, I have to go somewhere else to find where these cards are, so just give me a second. The first one we had there was actually Narcy, Fable Singer. She has lifelink. It says, whenever you sacrifice an enchantment, draw a card. I'm not too sure that we're sacrificing too many enchantments inside this deck. I mean, some of them, but okay. So another way to draw cards inside this deck, right? So whenever the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is that saga's mana value. So now we know why all the sagas are inside this deck. It's because Narcy's here. Guys, some people are gonna build this deck just for, just for Narcy, because Narcy is, that's a really fun ability. I mean, both these commanders seem, this deck just in its entirety seems really fun to play, if I'm being honest. The only place I could find the cards was over here, so I know my image is extremely huge right now, but let's just deal with it. We have Battle at the Hell Vault. So Battle at the Hell Vault says, for each player, exile up to 1 target non-saga, non-land permanent that player controls until Battle at the Hell Vault leaves the battlefield for 2 turns in a row, okay? And then you get to create Avacyn, a legendary 8/8 white angel creature token with flying, vigilance, and indestructible. Which is cool. For 6 mana, you get an 8/8 creature token that's indestructible. It's pretty nice, and you get to remove 2 things until this leaves the battlefield. I will say that once this expires, whatever you exiled is gonna re-enter the battlefield, so just keep that in mind. We have Boon of the Spirit Realm, which says, whenever Boon of the Spirit Realm or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a blessing counter on Boon of the Spirit Realm. Creatures you control get +1/+1 for each blessing counter on Boon of the Spirit Realm. Wow, guys, in this deck, this card could go off. I mean, you already know how many enchantments you got inside this deck. Imagine making multiple copies of this, so your creatures are getting +1/+1 for each boon that you have, and each counter on each boon that you have. Yeah, this card's awesome right here. This card's gonna win games. Oh wow, we have Cacophony Unleashed. There's a lot of words here. Enchantment, 7 mana. Okay, so it's gotta be good. When Cacophony Unleashed enters the battlefield, if you cast it, destroy all non-enchantment creatures. Okay, so it's a one-sided board wipe. Whenever Cacophony Unleashed or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, so it's an enchantment board wipe, okay, enters the battlefield under your control, until the end of turn, Cacophony Unleashed becomes a 6/6 Nightmare God with Menace and Death Touch. It's still an enchantment. Yeah, this is a cool card. I mean, it's a 6/6 that you get to play after you wipe the board. I mean, it's interesting. I ain't gonna hate on it. I think it's a cool card. Composer of Spring. This card already looks really strong. 2 mana. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. More landfall stuff. If you control 6 or more enchantments, instead you may put a creature or land from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Yeah, wow. Guys, also keep in mind, like, when you get to put creatures onto the battlefield for free, like, sometimes people wait for you to do that so that they can just, like, wipe the board in response to you doing that. So just keep that in mind. Be smart about it. We have a Demon of Fate's Design. So Flying Trample. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an enchantment spell by paying life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. You can pay 3, sacrifice another enchantment. Demon of Fate's Design gets +X+0, where X is a sacrifice enchantment's mana value. Cool. That's going to be really good with Narcy. Ghoulish Impetus. Generally, these cards goad creatures. So enchanted creature gets +1/+1 death touch and is goaded, like I said. When enchanted creature dies, return Ghoulish Impetus to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So, oh, that's new. So basically you just get to keep goading things, which is pretty nice. That's probably the best version of that card they ever printed. Oh, wow. Nyxborn Behemoth. This spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total mana value of non-creature enchantments you control. It's a 10/10 with trample. You can then pay 2 mana to sack another enchantment, and this gains indestructible to the end of turn. What a cool card, dude. This card is so good. It just looks cool. I want 5 of them on the battlefield for no reason. Undo, oh, this card looks strong. Undo Spirit Dancer, 5 mana. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a token that's a copy of it. Do this only once each turn. Dude. I mean, okay. What if you have multiple copies of the Undo Spirit Dancer and then you're doing that multiple times per turn? This is the best card inside the deck. This card is probably the most expensive card in the entire deck. Okay, now that we're back to the normal size, that's gonna be it for the Enduring Enchantments review, guys. This deck is, you know, going into Commander Masters, when people, just for new players so that you guys have our perspective as longtime Magic players, you know, whenever we have Masters sets, they're generally cards that are extremely powerful and very expensive. And I think that going into these precons being announced, I think a lot of players assumed that they were going to be printing a ton of expensive cards into these precons because that's just what we're kind of used to with Masters sets in general. But what I think we are receiving is decks that are made extremely well. They're extremely focused in strategies that are extremely unique and fun to play. So any of these precons or all of the precons from Commander Masters are going to be extremely fun. You're probably not going to get, you know, a huge amount of value from these Commander decks. However, they're just made extremely well. Like I can see anybody sitting down with this Commander deck and being able to compete against anybody with these decks. If I had to give this a score out of 10, I would give this deck a 9.5 out of 10. I think this deck is incredibly competitive. That last card where you're creating token copies of your enchantments just seems absolutely amazing. I mean, and like I mentioned earlier, this is kind of like a landfall and enchantment deck. So if you want, when you purchase this, if you have other cards in your collection, you can split this deck into 2 or maybe even 3, because Narcy over here cares about sagas. So you can build a saga deck from this, an Enchantress deck from this, and then a landfall deck if you wanted to. Okay, so that's gonna be it for the video, guys. Always remember, eat healthy, okay? Work out every single day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. And most important, you guys gotta remember to believe in yourself, all right? Real quick, guys, when I talk about eating healthy, people generally tend to think that I'm saying that you should remove bad foods from your diet. The reality is that there are some foods that cause inflammation in your body, and then there are foods that are not causing inflammation. So when we're talking about bad foods tend to cause inflammation in your system, which means that you become bloated or inflamed. So, in order to counteract that, if you introduce foods that are anti-inflammatory, like drinking things like apple cider vinegar, it does a really good job of reducing the inflammation inside your system so that you feel healthier. So, when I talk about eating healthy, it's more about adding healthy things to your diet and or anti-inflammatory foods as opposed to just removing the things that people would view as unhealthy. Okay? Peace out, people.